Hello dear compatriots, today, February 10th, is the old one, and in this program we will address issues related to Armenia. The important thing is that the head of the European Union monitoring mission in Armenia, Marcos Ree, gave an interview to Armen Press and made a very important statement. We will talk about the negotiation process that took place between Russia and the United States. Zelensky statement in the European Union. Now, in Paris, the extraordinary city again, the meeting will be held for the second round of that extraordinary summit. We will discuss these issues, and we will try to understand together what is happening in this very confusing global situation. It is difficult to understand, but nevertheless, we will try to understand and discuss together different things. Scenarios. Before the program starts, I will definitely remind you again, subscribers for likes, for posts, as well as for comments, by the way. I see that the English section is not very successful. Unfortunately, although 1 views are nothing, average, but 1 is very low. Let's see how the first month goes. But there are also 1 encouraging comments. For example, there were 3 comments which a person who is receiving information about Armenia from abroad for the first time through our broadcast thought that he had not found any English program about Armenia at all. This was the first, and it was very interesting for him to hear about Armenia. And let's not only see what fate our English translation will have, but we will continue to post it. And for its activation, I would like to remind you again that if you have time, of course, and you can definitely do it. You can also like and comment on these programs to increase their visibility. Let's start our program, and already, as I mentioned, follow the interview of the head of the European Union monitoring mission in Armenia, Marcos, on Armen Press, and bring interesting factual details in that interview. For us, according to him, Brussels has extended this important mandate of the European Union monitoring mission because it is considered to be very useful for Armenia, for the Armenian people, and bring stability to our region. He also said that he had a meeting with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and agreed on the border lines that have already been imitated on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The mission will not conduct an observation mission. According to him, if they agree, there is no problem for them to approach that border line, but that does not prevent them, so that they can visit villages and communicate with people. That is, continue their observation mission a little further from the border. And this is a very important statement because, in fact, if tomorrow, say, demarcation and delimitation between Azerbaijan and Armenia take place, the final border observation mission may not leave Armenia at all. I was talking about this. If you mention in previous programs, I specifically said that they could withdraw a little, but at the same time, somehow remain in Armenia. And here it is. From this interview, it becomes clear that they naturally, being in the Armenian territory of the Republic of Armenia, have the right to visit Armenian villages, various other regions. But the authorities of the Republic of Armenia will not approach the delimited border upon request, and this is very logical and also gives rise to hope that in the future, an observation mission may remain in Armenia whenever the demarcation and delimitation of that common border between Azerbaijan and Armenia should take place. And since I am in Brussels, I think that this mission is very useful to Armenia. Naturally, our people think the same way, and that's why there is no reason for this mission to leave Armenia at all. I hope that this mission, if I can put it this way, will even remain in Armenia forever. It may change in form or name, but it should definitely be the European Union's observation mission. I believe it would be very good for it to stay in Armenia. Marcos also addressed the accusations coming from Azerbaijan. He talked about how both sides, they are preparing for a very bad scenario, the worst case scenario, but at this moment the situation is calm and peaceful. This statement clearly indicates one thing. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan are trying to arm themselves and prepare for potential future tensions and possible war. We need to understand this very specifically and directly, and we must draw conclusions from it. But at the same time, he says that at this moment we do not see any tension, and there is no tension at all. This has been ongoing for several months, which is, of course, very good for Armenia. I just want to add one thing. Now, as negotiations between Russia and the United States have started, these interactions may become quite frequent. And that sentence is, yesterday I also paid attention to the fact that they discussed general geopolitical interests and found common ground. And I believe that in the South Caucasus, everything will definitely be related to that. That is why it is very important that the Armenian government and Armenian politicians try to better understand the position of the United States of America and try to establish strong ties with the United States of America so that it does not happen that Armenia also, and in general the South Caucasus, will yield only to Russian influence. Although I don't think such a thing will happen, as Russia has indeed weakened significantly due to the war in Ukraine and won't be able to exert control over these three republics in any way. But at the same time, it's very important for us to work with the American side, and of course, not just with America, but also with the European Union. The European Union is actually becoming a separate and powerful player in this matter, and we will touch on that now. But it's very important for Armenia to also engage the United States. For example, look, Trump is trying everywhere to pursue and find the interests of the United States. There will definitely be a way to find the interests of the United States in Armenia, even in Shunik. And if we have some American company in Shunika, it doesn't matter what they register. They will specifically export certain metals or build some other center. In the grand scheme of things, that's not very important. But what's crucial is that the United States will have a presence in the Republic of Armenia, which will naturally enhance Armenia's sovereignty, independence, and security, and not just in terms of direct conflict security, but also will increase the political security of Armenia and will further enhance the sovereignty of Armenia. As for the European Union is now becoming a separate and very powerful player. Everything that is happening in Europe is quite complicated. But let me say the following. The European Union must undergo a major serious transformation. If it wants to, it should be an important player in the world, and as Macron said, it shouldn't be considered a territory for vegetarians. If you're a vegetarian, of course, you can be preyed upon by much more ferocious animals, which is why you also need to be able to defend yourself. And this is a fact that is happening now. Today, the second extraordinary summit is taking place in Paris at Macron's initiative, and I believe that we might have a more serious announcement from the European Union today. Why have the United States and Russia started this? Why is Trump announcing that Zelensky's rating has dropped to 4%? I don't believe that's the case, and he says that Russia could destroy all of Ukraine's cities if it wanted to, but Russia doesn't want to do that. That's what Trump is saying. And there should be developments in Ukraine. There were presidential elections, and the American side is also saying that participation will end after that. Now a ceasefire will indeed be established, after which presidential elections will take place, and only then can we talk about lasting peace. Although Lavrov has denied this idea, everything comes down to the fact that Donald Trump and the American authorities are now trying to impose new presidential elections on Ukraine. Ukraine, of course, is resisting, and it is not alone in this resistance. The European Union is also with Ukraine. From today's statement, I believe we will soon see that this is indeed the case. During his meeting with Erdogan, Zelensky stated that he no longer feels the support of the United States, and he found it very surprising that Ukraine was not invited to the Riyadh meetings. He has already cancelled his visit to Saudi Arabia, which was supposed to take place today, moving it to March 10th. He was supposed to visit today, but that visit has been postponed, and there is also noticeable tension in the rhetoric regarding food towards the United States. But what is important here is, what if the statement of German Foreign Minister Alina Burmach is correct, in that the European Union will allocate $700 billion to Ukraine, or else, I said this, I reported this information. One of our compatriots, one important, difficult $700 billion, 107, $100 billion is a huge amount, imagine. Only 1% of it should be allocated to Armenia and Georgia. Many issues can be solved in Armenia and Georgia, both militarily and economically. But $700 billion is a huge number for Ukraine, and for this war it exceeds the aid of the United States for several years, and the aid of the European Union can be included in it several times, i.e. I see incomparably large, one might say. The European Union can increase its support for Ukraine tenfold, and if such support is increased for Ukraine, I don't think Ukraine needs the support of the United States of America at all in this war. Why? I'm saying this because the European Union is indeed facing a lot of difficulties, but at the same time it can take such a bold step, which is challenging because we're talking about really huge amounts of money, and this will undoubtedly affect Europe as well. But it's not just about the extraordinary summit. It seems that Europe is declaring a state of emergency due to the policies of the United States. This policy can indeed affect many issues in Europe. It could either become a stable and strong separate factor, or lead to very negative consequences for the European Union, including of course for us as well. Let's see. I hope that for Ukraine's sake, the European Union will find the strength within itself. Why is the United States activating its connections with the Russian Federation? By the way, I should also mention that often there are changes in the positions of the United States. At least at the statement level, there are many contradictory statements. That is why I cannot say what the final position of the United States of America will be regarding Ukraine. I would even dare to say that the new government of the United States of America has not yet formed a final idea of what they will do regarding Ukraine. On the one hand, this idea is influenced by the Russian Federation. On the other hand, the European Union and Ukraine, and now still the United States, haven't really made a specific decision regarding Ukraine. Trump wants to end this war, by all means, but he is facing new and significant challenges. However, why is Trump acting this way, wanting to deepen relations and restore ties with the Russian Federation, lifting sanctions against Russia even in general? Global geopolitical interests, like it will try to be pursued by the Russian Federation and the United States. And now we reach the most important point of our discussion. If you remember, those who have been following our broadcast closely, I mentioned months ago that it would be very logical if the Russian Federation became an ally of the United States against China. In other words, the United States is mainly focusing on China. That's what we can do. We can come to that conclusion based on numerous statements that have been made. There are reports from the United States. He called Xi Jinping excited about their good conversation. He called Xi a friend and said he'd help resolve relations with Russia. Trump is now focusing on re-establishing a good relationship with Putin. They are trying to restore US-Russia relations. It's complicated, but Trump believes it's possible as Russia's dependence will grow. The relationship with Putin is on the mend. That is, they are trying something new. Establishing good relations with Putin was my goal. That is, they had that good relationship. I am talking about restoring all the relations that existed between the United States of America and Russia. I will say right away that it is very difficult, but Trump believes that it is possible, and I think that all this is being done globally because in a few years, the dependence of the Russian Federation will increase much more from the United States of America rather than from China. Now we see a huge dependence on China, and now they will try to make Russia even more dependent on the United States of America. That was the idea behind Trump's plan. How much it will work out, I can't say. And this idea that Donald Trump is pursuing will generally shift against China, but here it turns out that Europe is also becoming an obstacle to that idea. China understands very well what's happening, and that's why the Chinese foreign minister is making interesting statements and taking steps towards Europe. And not only that, but also today's statement of the funds on the part of Europe. That is, we can see somewhere the coincidence of interests between the European Union and China is a very interesting and global game now unfolding all over the world. It is difficult, really very difficult, to draw any concrete conclusions. Very often everything changes, and we can make mistakes, and not only we, but also politicians make mistakes, change themselves. They are changing their political lines and so on. And this is especially happening due to the frequently changing policies of the United States. However, considering that Donald Trump has only been in power for a month, we should hope that at least in the coming months, he will have established political views regarding Europe, China, and Russia. Regarding the South Caucasus, as I mentioned, Zelensky was in Turkey and was having a meeting with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkey has clearly expressed support for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Recently, Turkey's name has been mentioned very little. In the context of Russia, the United States, Ukraine, and Europe in this puzzle, let's see how events develop overall. As I repeat, let me remind you that a very important second extraordinary summit is going to take place in Paris. Macron has already stated that when it comes to sending troops to Ukraine, it doesn't mean that French soldiers, the French, should immediately go and participate in military operations. Meanwhile, in Great Britain, the Prime Minister has started to discuss and announce much more seriously that they are very serious about sending a military contingent to Ukraine. He says that it's quite a difficult and responsible step. The British, serious about sending a military contingent to Ukraine. He says it is a rather difficult and responsible step. However, he is ready to make such a decision. That's all for now, dear compatriots. I urge you to definitely like the site, and we will meet with success.